Shalom. All praises to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem Akakodash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the bishops, and the elders of GMS who rule well. Peace and salutations to the elect. My name is Aina. The title of the video is These Devils Run the World. Right. And ultimately, I'm just going over this video here. This lady, this is her page, right? Says Chabad runs Russia, and that includes Putin and many others. I believe she's Russian. She's very concerned about who runs the world and who controls her president, Vladimir Putin, and things like that. So she goes into videos like that. In this video, she's, specifically just touching on like Russia, as she says here. The Chabad, Chabad Lubavitch is a major Hasidic movement in Orthodox Jewish organization founded in the 18th century, right? So around the 1700s, right? I believe it says known for its global outreach, educational, and social services, right? These are the Amalekites, right? The small hatters, small toppers, the 1948ers over in the land of Israel, right? And they run the world. Job 9:24 says the earth is given to the hand of the wicked, right? And in this video here, this devil explains some of that. It goes into, with everything happening right now regarding the policies, regarding the 7 wars and in Iran. He explains how the USSR kind of felt, and how they were, basically they the one who did it, and things like that. So I'm gonna play like nine minutes or this or something like that, and you can check out the video, right? And I'll get a few two precepts whatnot.
And this was schools and chadorim and yeshivas, and he would open a school and the KGB would close it. He would send a rabbi to a community.
All right, let me back it up just a little bit.
9 Hasidim, and he swears an oath to the death to keep Judaism alive in Russia. And he begins a process of building Judaism.
So now what he's talking about is basically Amalekites, trying to do this thing, right? So this is like basically USSR time, right? Because when they took over the president or whoever, prime minister or however he's called of the USSR, it was this guy right here. All right. And basically KGB pulled up on his president, and that is a Russian type of agency like FBI and things like that, and they pulled up on their own mans, right? So and the Amalekites was behind it, right? All right, so you can look these things up. I thought it was interesting, and he just says basically how they control, and bought up everything, so let their own tongue fall upon themselves. I believe it's 64. Let me see. And these devils been doing that a lot lately, Psalm 64. Well, this is old, but we're in that time. Psalm 64:8, it says, "So they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves; all that see them shall flee away."
In Russia, and this was schools and chadorim and yeshivas, and he would open a school and the KGB would close it. He would send a rabbi to a community and they would arrest him. It was a process that went on and on for many, many years. What we don't know about the Chabad system in Russia from the Chabad side, we know about it from the other side. We know a little bit from the Chabad side. Most we know is from the testimony.
In the Chabad, they have like different locations and different hubs and things like that, right? These are the Amalekites, the small hatters. And what made me really interested in this video is, we can see how these Amalekites can control the world and how they're behind these different presidents and how they're going to push, this system, basically the MOTB, because they're at the forefront of all of this, right? They control everybody and all of it, but they're divided, too, all right?
And the accounts written by members of the Israeli Secret Service, because the Chabad side, everything was a total secret. Nothing was done publicly. Everything was done 4 eyes in the Rebbe's office. The Rebbe's secretaries knew nothing about what was going on. Nobody knew anything. Everything was an absolute secret. And a lot of those people that were involved in the process are no longer in this world. So Lebanon now, because every Friday in the bathhouse they meet, letters and communications and things that need to come from Russia to go to New York to ask the Rebbe questions are sent through the Israeli government in the diplomatic pouch. And this process goes on for years until 1967. The Israeli government is the conduit for books, for materials. They're shipping in stuff, they're doing things, and they're working quietly together. What did Levinon say? He said that this was a system that was nothing like they had. It was in every city and every town. It reached into the communities one after another. And it was really an amazing system. The Mossad's cooperation with the Rebbe continued in Russia in many different kinds of ways. Even afterwards, it continued much further on. After 1967, when the Israelis lost the embassy because diplomatic relations were closed between Russia and Israel, he says the Rebbe had a better system of intelligence in Russia than we did. In April of 1985, 3 weeks after Gorbachev is named the premier of Russia, Professor Herman Braunover, who some of you may know, who was a very well-known Russian professor, he was paid a very high ransom to get out of Russia. The Rebbe calls him in, he wants to speak to him. And this is what he tells him. He says to him, the gates of Russia are going to come down soon. The Jews of Russia are going to be released. I don't want you to call the media. I want you to call the Jews in Russia, your contacts in Russia.
When he said the gates of Russia is going to go down, that was this part right here. When they basically had that inside information that they was about to move and do something. You know, just like when Trump went into Venezuela, right? They already knew what they was going to do. That's what you had to do. Nate Rothschild talking about job well done or whatever the case may be. Just like they already had planned out the 7 wars. They knew they was going to go into Iran, right? And they're saying the same thing now. The gates of Iran shall go down soon, right? But this time, the Most High, Yahweh Bashar al-Shas, you know, is not going to let them accomplish, you know, their goals. All right, this is going to be World War III for them. But that's what he's talking about. You know, the beginning of the fall of the USSR. You know, and it was them behind it. That's what he's saying.
Braunover was a big activist. There was a group of different Jewish organizations, Shamir, Chama, Ezras Achim. These are different Chabad organizations that were doing secret work in Russia. And Braunover was one of the prime activists. I want you to call the Jews in Russia, and I want you to tell them that soon they're going to leave the country and everything's going to change. He's astounded. Gorbachev is prime minister, premier 3 weeks. He gets on the phone. He calls some activists in Moscow. And the guy tells him, listen, there's a KGB car in front of my house right now. My wife was taken in for questioning, and the sense of disbelief is beyond belief.
So they had their agents, you know, to go in and capture this dude, question his wife and things like that. All right. The premier of Russia. All right, let's get it. It says Gorbachev, you know, was the, you know, whatever his name is. It says was the final leader of the Soviet Union, serving as a general secretary of the Communist Party 1985-1991, and the first and only president of the USSR. 1990, 1991, Putin got in there in 1991. Right, he was not the premier of Russia, but rather the leader of the entire Soviet Union. His reforms led to the end of the Cold War, right, and basically the dissolve of the USSR in 1991. But this devil is saying that it's because of the small adders did it, right? They turned the people on them. Right, so after that dude that they got out, this dude was next, and then now you have Vladimir Putin. Okay, and I said, did KGB? Yes, I said, did the KGB go against the president premier? He says yes. The KGB actively moved against their president during the August 1991 Soviet coup, you know, attempt led by KGB chairman. All right. So they detained the president as chairman, his house, right, to stop his reforms, reverse the liberalization of the Soviet Union, and prevent the signing of a new union treaty. All right, and this devil was saying they did it.
The next day, he writes in a report to the Rebbe that he made a series of calls, And he says, nobody believes it. And the Rebbe says, the change is underway, but it's just not apparent.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
We all know what Gorbachev did, that Gorbachev went in the late 80s, early 90s. He changed the policy of the former Soviet Union, and he allowed Jews to leave.
Now the Soviets themselves may, in a limited way, be coming to understand the importance of freedom. We hear much from Moscow about a new policy of reform and openness. Some political prisoners have been released.
If you go back to the 80s, Senator Henry Scoop Jackson got a bill through Congress allowing the immigration of Soviet Jews to the United States at a time when immigration had been highly restricted.
We'll honor the right of a person to leave a country freely and return freely, just as clear as anything can be.
The Russians saw it as an opportunity to open their jails. That's when you see members of Russian organized crime come to the United States for the very, very first time.
In June of 1992, Gorbachev comes to Ben Gurion University in the Negev to get an honorary degree. One of the professors at Ben Gurion University is Herman Broniver. The president of Ben Gurion University asked Herman Broniver, would he please be the personal host and take Gorbachev around his visit to Ben Gurion University in the Negev. He tells him, fine. In the middle of the visit, he says, I have to tell you a story. He tells him in 1985, tells him the exact, in April 1985, the Rebbe called me in, he told me this whole story, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And he tells this to Gorbachev. So Gorbachev turns to him and he says to him, how could he know if I didn't know?
Right. So he's, the product, part of his devil heart. He's like the president of Russia is like, how did he know? I didn't know, but the Amalekites knew, right? They knew. They did an inside job.
A year later, he's in Oxford. Peter Kalms, the father-in-law of Heshi Epstein, who was the president of Shamir, tells Gorbachev the same story about what happened in April of 1985, and Gorbachev tells Peter Kalms, how could he know if I didn't know? The story has been verified from two different historical sources.
ארץ קטנה כמונו, זה מדהים.
All right, so now listen to what this devil says here. Right, this is what I believe he's is it the first president? But he's the president and prime minister of Israel. All right.
ואני רואה שאנחנו קונים את מנהטן, וקונים את הונגריה, וקונים את רומניה, וקונים את פולין. אז אין בעיות לנו, אני מבין שהכישרונות והקשרים והתנופה מגיעה כמעט לכל מקום. וזה באמת מעניין. מעניין מפני שאנחנו ארץ קטנה בסך הכל, וכנראה שקשה לנו מאוד יהיה להיות ארץ תעשייתית. פשוט אין לנו מספיק שוק מקומי גדול בשביל לעשות תעשייה מקומית.
See that? So these devils, they run and operate the world, just like the scriptures say. Right, they're behind it all, and they're boasting and they're proud about it. So, I just wanted to share that little quick video. This is Obadiah 1 and 3. It says, the pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashmi Al-Shad. All right. So, that's all I had. Lord willing, you were edified, and you see, the truth about these devils running the world. All right. Shalom to the hopeful elect, which consists of men, women, and children. Shalom.